Hello everyone and welcome to another Star Wars figure review. Today we're going to take a look at a deluxe action figure set from the Black Series 6-inch line. I told a little bit of a white lie in my last video where I said that Commander Cody would be my last 6-inch figure review until the Force Awakens products arrive, but I forgot about this guy, so I'm a little bit late to the party on this one. He has been sitting in my collection for quite some time, but obviously I've had quite a backlog of reviews to get through. And yeah, as I said, just completely forgot about this guy. So here he is, a long way to review, and it is of course none other than this one. The Black Series 6-inch Han Solo with Tauntaun. This figure is of course based on the scene in The Empire Strikes Back where Han Solo rides the Tauntaun in search of his friend Luke Skywalker. And this is of course the first 6-inch Tauntaun that we've ever seen from Hasbro. It's a decent pack, you know. This one retails for $39.99, and in my opinion that is a little bit overpriced. The Han Solo action figure is relatively good, and I'll talk about him individually in just a little bit. But the Tauntaun is ever so slightly disappointing, and again I'll discuss why that is in just a minute as well. Before we do, as always, we are going to take a look at the packaging that this Hoth duo come in. And unlike the most recent Deluxe Black Series 6-inch set that I gave you a look at, which was the Imperial Shadow Squadron, as you can see, this particular set doesn't feature any backdrop in the actual box itself, which in my opinion is a huge missed opportunity. You know, this could have been an awesome in-box display if Hasbro had included a scene from Hoth there in the background, but instead we just get this generic black background that not only makes the box look very empty, but makes the product minting box look a little bit boring. So, you know, I hope that that's something that obviously changes once the 6-inch Force Awakens line arrives, but, you know, we'll wait and see. As you can see from the front of the box, you've got the window there where the action figures would be displayed, and we have the Black Series logo down in the bottom corner. On the reverse side of the box, we have a still image taken from The Empire Strikes Back, obviously with Han riding the Tauntaun there, and just above that we get a character description and a quote from the movie as well. So there is the packaging that this one comes in. You've also got that very cool medallion image of Han just at the top of the box there as well. So that is the box that these two figures come in. Now let's take a look at what we get inside. Now, as I said, this is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of pros and cons. The Han Solo figure is adequate. He's not exceptional, but he'll do. He does have his flaws, however. And the Tauntaun, for me personally, is just one big disappointment. It had the potential to be such a great item, but it just fails in so many areas, and as I said, I'll talk about why that is in just a little bit. The main issue for me personally is the fact that this toy feels very, very cheap, and also the fact that the Tauntaun actually features less articulation points than the Vintage Collection release from the 3 3/4 inch line, which is ridiculous in my opinion. You know, the 6-inch line is supposed to open up a gateway of articulation, of premium detail, and this pack just fails to do that, and it's a huge disappointment in that respect. Now, as you can see, Han Solo does indeed ride the Tauntaun quite well in this pack, and he looks very cool doing so. Don't get me wrong, as a display piece this is pretty cool, and it does look great from afar. Once you get up close and really start to analyse the detail or lack thereof in this action figure set, you really begin to get an appreciation, again, or lack of, as to what has actually gone into this set. So there's a look at Han Solo on the Tauntaun. We'll break this review down into two parts in just a moment and take a look at each of these figures individually. So there we go. Now we're going to kick things off with this review by taking a look at none other than Han Solo himself. So what we're going to do is we are going to try our best to remove him from the Tauntaun. That's quite easy. And take a look at this figure in a little bit more detail. Now, as I said, he is a decent figure. He's not perfect by any means, and he certainly seems to be one of the least articulated Black Series 6-inch figures that's been released so far. But from an aesthetic perspective, he's not a bad figure. He certainly looks the part, a great sculpt, but in terms of articulation, he does fall a little bit short, and that is a huge shame because, as I mentioned earlier, this particular set had tons of potential. Now, with this particular figure, as I mentioned, articulation is a little bit of an issue, but for the most part we do get the sort of standard 6-inch articulation points. It's just that for whatever reason, with this particular figure, Hasbro decided to abandon the concept of ball hinged wrists, and we've just got a swivel at the wrist instead, or at the forearm rather, which, you know, isn't a major deal breaker by any means, but it's a bit of a baffling decision, and obviously when the figure loses a vital articulation point such as in the wrist, it just devalues the figure a little bit in my opinion, especially, as I said, when these figures are 6 inches tall. There is so much more room for articulation and detail, and for figures to slide by just like this is a little bit unacceptable, especially for the price that we're paying. Now, in terms of the rest of the figure, I actually really like this guy. He comes with a decent amount of accessories, which of course include the DL44 blaster pistol. All this time I've been calling the Clone Trooper blaster pistols DL44s, when in fact this is a DL44. Very nice sculpt, as you can see. I believe it's the same one that was included with the Best Bin Luke Skywalker figure. You've got that painted brown handle there as well. You also got a pair of macro binoculars with Han Solo. As you can see, those are drooped around the neck and can be removed if you so desire. We'll take a look at those in just a little bit. And as you can see, there is some great sculpted detail within the hood, which is also removable, but for the purposes of this review, I'm not going to do that. Han never really takes the hood off in the movie, at least not to the point where we see the hat underneath. And again, for time constraints, I'm just going to leave that on for the time being. But it can be removed, and as you can see, there is a slot at the back of the head which allows you to remove that hood quite easily. Now, it's made of a very soft rubbery plastic, so there's no issues there with the taking on and off of the hood. And as you can see, you've got the goggles underneath there as well, which can be removed and placed over the face. But it's quite a fiddly job. So again, for the purposes of this review and for keeping it nice and tidy, we're just going to avoid doing that for now. Now, one other major issue for me personally with this particular figure is Hasbro's ignorance towards screen accuracy. Hasbro know full well that Han Solo's coat in The Empire Strikes Back was brown, and this is a long-running issue throughout Hasbro action figures. You know, there's always been that question, is Han's coat blue or is it brown? Well, we know that it's brown, but for whatever reason, Hasbro decided to sculpt it, or paint it rather, in blue for this action figure, and while it does create a nice look, it's not accurate, and I know that there are going to be original trilogy purists out there that are going to go absolutely crazy about that one, so it does lose a few points in that respect. But as I said, in terms of sculpted detail, you've got all the texture of the coat there, you've got that padding sculpted in around the shoulders, as you can see on the torso there, we've got the pockets and the rank badge. So no major issues in terms of the detail, but the colour of the coat overall obviously shouldn't have been ignored. As we make our way down the figure, obviously we get Han Solo's utility belt there, which comes with the little comlink attached to the belt. Got the silver buckle and of course the holster there, which can store the blaster pistol. Again, moving our way down the figure, we've got some more sculpted detail in the rest of the outfit, padding in the knees and those very cool boots. Bit of weathering wouldn't have gone amiss on this figure, but it's not a major issue. And for the most part, he is a fairly acceptable figure. As I said, there are a few glaring issues with this one that probably should have been avoided, the coat being one of them, and obviously that flawed articulation in the wrists. But other than that, it's a decent figure. He does his job, which is of course to ride the Tauntaun. So for that purpose, you know, he's not going to lose any major points. And for me personally, he's actually the highlight of this set, which is probably the wrong way to do things, because obviously this is a deluxe set, so the main focus should be on the Tauntaun, but that particular figure just fails in so many ways. So moving on from Han Solo, let's take a look at that epic failure that is the 6-inch Tauntaun. Now, as I said, this thing had so much potential to be a really cool item. The sculpt itself is really nice. I'm a huge fan of the detail that's gone into this one. But in terms of paint applications and articulation, it just feels like a very lazy attempt on Hasbro's part. In many ways it just feels like an upscaled version of the 3 3/4 inch release, but just with a little bit less painted detail, which is a bit of a shame considering the scale of this particular figure. Now, as I mentioned earlier on in the review, this particular Tauntaun does lose out on articulation, and in that respect it does feature less articulation points than the 3 3/4 inch release. For whatever reason, Hasbro thought it would be a great idea to remove a lot of the articulation points in this figure and basically create a 5 point of articulation 6 inch figure, which this essentially is, and it does lose a lot of points for that. Now, while we do have a ball joint in the neck, which obviously allows the Tauntaun to look up and down and all around, although it's a very tight joint, the rest of the articulation points have been replaced with swivels or been removed completely, which is a huge shame in my opinion. As you can see, we've just got swivels at the shoulders there, and we've got swivels at the hips. We also have hinges at the knees, so I guess it bumps it up to 7 points of articulation. But again, there's just, I don't know, there's just minimal effort gone into this thing, and as I said, it just feels like a very lazy attempt by Hasbro to throw the Tauntaun out there in the 6 inch line. Now, another thing that really bothers me about this particular Tauntaun figure is the fact that it is very lightweight. You know, it's not a sturdy or heavy piece. The plastic feels almost hollow. It's just a very cheap feeling toy, and again, for the £40 or $40 that you're going to set out and pay for this thing, I just feel that a lot more effort should have gone into it, and again, for that purpose it does lose a few points. Now, the third and final issue with this particular Tauntaun is the paint job, which is fairly basic. You know, around the head we've got decent paint applications, especially on the horns there. Got some nice weathered you know, detail going on, and the head sculpt itself is really nice, but the rest of the figure just feels very plain, very cartoonish. You know, it's just one flat shade of grey, which in today's climate should be avoided, or in today's collecting climate should I say. You know, we should be seeing really nice weathered detail on this thing. You know, the fur should stand out. Again, for the price that we're paying for this, it really should pop and stand out, and it just doesn't. You know, it just feels very cheap, very lazy, and very underwhelming. Now, the saddle, which the Tauntaun has on its back, obviously for Han Solo to ride. Again, very minimal detail gone into this, very minimal paint applications. We do have a couple of slots at either side for Han's feet to go into. And we do, of course, have those ammo pouches and rucksacks attached to the back. But again, the whole thing just feels very cheap. Not only that, but you may remember the 3 3/4 inch release from the Vintage Collection featured straps that stretched around the Tauntaun's belly, fastened in place, and just created a really nice premium look for the Vintage Collection Tauntaun. But with this particular saddle, it just clips off. You know, it attaches via 2 pegs and holes in the back. I don't know, it just feels very cheap to me. Very lazy, very cheap indeed. And you know, I'm just not really digging this Tauntaun, to be honest with you. I'm finding it very hard to say good things about it. The sculpt is good, but it should be. The paint apps are rubbish, which they shouldn't be. You know, I don't know, there's just something about this one that doesn't really click. So yeah, not the best 6 inch deluxe set that Hasbro have released. Just before we wrap up this review, I will give you a zoom in on this thing, just to give you a look at a little bit more of the lack of detail that's in this thing. Again, the head sculpt is decent, but not fantastic. Those paint applications that are missing from this figure would have gone a very long way in my opinion. And as I said, the rest of the figure just feels very cheap. It looks very cheap. I just can't get over that hollow plastic. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. So yeah, not the best Tauntaun that we've seen Hasbro put out. Could have been so much better, and especially for the price, it should have been so much better. There's no two ways about it. So if you, for whatever reason, do want to add this particular set to your collection. That is of course the Tauntaun and Han Solo in his Hoth outfit. Then be sure to hit the link in the video description, which will take you to staractionfigures.co.uk. This particular set is currently in stock, and as I said, it does retail for $39.99, which in my opinion is way overpriced for this particular set. But what can you do? This is what we're dealing with at the moment, it seems, from Hasbro. So yeah, a little bit underwhelming and a little bit disappointing. So that is going to do it for this rant, or review as I like to call it. Just not many good things to say about this particular set. Could have been so much better, and it just loses quite a lot of points for many of those flaws that I touched base on. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful. If you haven't already picked up this set, I hope it's made the purchase easier for you. And as I said, I'll be back with some more reviews very soon to do for you. I've got some really cool 3 3/4 inch Black Series figures to review for you, and also some brand new Lego sets as well. So there's plenty to look forward to on the channel, even if you weren't looking forward to seeing this, which is just one big heap of junk. So thank you for watching this review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and as I mentioned, I'll be back very, very soon. So until then, as always, keep collecting, and may the force be with you.